has goals about that. So, guys, we will see you. I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Jerry Jean, who is a U.S. Navy veteran of World War II, who was a radio man on an L.S.T, which is Landing Ship Tank. And he was there at D-Day. He was at Omaha Beach, which was the worst place to be in France on that day. All the other 4 beaches were a lot easier by comparison. So Mr. Jean is here to share some of his thoughts and perspectives with you. So Mr. Jean, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Well, I hope you get something out of it. I decided to join the Navy after Pearl Harbor on December 7th. I wanted to join that day, but I cooled off the next day, because that was on a Sunday, Pearl Harbor. And the next day, Monday, I decided that I wasn't going to join right off quick. I had some more enjoying of life to do. So I waited until September 2nd, or close to September, the following year, 1942. And I joined the Navy on my mother's birthday, September 2nd, 1942. I decided to join the Navy because my dad had been in the Army, World War I, and he had to sleep in foxholes. And that was in the mud, and they got gas, they got shell shocked, and all kinds of. So I decided the Navy, at least they got bunks that you can sleep in. You don't have to sleep in the dirt. So I was sent to boot camp in Rhode Island in September, October. Took my 8 weeks of boot camp training. Had a short holiday or furlough before I was shipped to Norfolk, where he was going to get assigned to a ship or a crew. Someone came by and said, we're taking volunteers for a radio. Anybody interested in being a radio man? Fall in over here. Well, I was one of the first ones to jump to that opportunity, because I had been a fan of radio all the time I was a kid. I enjoyed listening to hillbilly or bluegrass music. It was called hillbilly then, and country music, and I dreamed of being a DJ, but never did. But anyway, I wanted to get into radio, so I joined the radio. And of course, it was for LCIs, which is a small boat, and you didn't have to have 8-9 months of radio training like they did on the regular radio. So we had 8 or 9 weeks, and I buckled down, and I was able to copy 8 or 9 to 12 words per minute. Of course, the regular radio men were copying 28 to 32 words a minute. The reason I say that is because for my Christmas vacation or Christmas furlough, I came home to get married, and my communication officer told me that if I was going to get married and needed more time, to let him know, and he would grant it. So I did send him a telegram, but I don't think he got it, and I never got the. But anyway, I went to AWOL because I took the extra time, and when I went back to Norfolk, I was AWOL, but the officers told me, since how come you didn't show up? I said, well, I was supposed to have an extension to get married, said, okay, well, did you get married? Yeah. All right, that's enough punishment for you, so go ahead. And he gave me a break. So I went to, so I had lost my crew for the LCIs because they went to Texas, Brownsville, Texas. But I was glad not to be on those LCIs because the experience I'd had before on the LCI while we were doing maneuvers on the Chesapeake Bay, they used an oil heater and that stunk and it was smoky and that wasn't good. That wasn't healthy. I got cough, cold, and I was glad to get out of there. But I was assigned instead to an L.S.T, which is a much bigger ship. But the radio men on that ship were 8-9 months compared to my 8-9 months, and they were just regular seamen, and I was rated third-class petty officer. So that didn't fit too good with my buddies. I was in charge of them, and they knew more than I did. But I had a little age on them. They were only 18, 19, or maybe 20. I was 22 at the time. So anyway, I got into trouble, and they decided to send me some more schooling. So I got off that crew and did some practicing. I'm taking code, and I got my code up to about 24 words a minute. Then they assigned me to another L.S.T, and I was able to keep up with those boys. And we left Norfolk, went to Boston to Halifax, Nova Scotia, and from Nova Scotia to St. John's, New Brunswick. Then we started out across the ocean. Because we had a big LCT on board our ship, and the weather was real rough, and the rain and snow, all it did was freeze, and it made us heavier and heavier and heavier. So we had to go chip ice, so that that was our job until to keep the boat from being too heavy. Then we hit the storms, and we had waves 100 feet high. When you get up on top of the wave, we could see way over. Then when you get into the bottom of the wave, all you see is a wave in front of you and a wave behind you. And when the propeller, the screw, came out of the water on account of the wave, then you could hear that screw spinning fast. And then when the water wave caught up to it, it would bounce the ship, and we didn't know what was happening. So it was very nerve-wracking to put up with the ship bouncing in and out of those waves. Then somebody would open up a hatch, that's a door, and then they would sometimes bang close as the ship was rolling, and we thought, well, we got hit. No, it was just a hatch. So it was nerve-wracking. So it took us almost a month, 4 weeks, to get across the ocean. Now that's a picture of a L.S.T. It's yeah, we was in New York. That's where we started. And we had an LCT.
Small boat on there.
Yeah, the LCT is on top of the deck there. When you have to launch them, they have a ballast where they take all the water off on one side and load it with water on the other side, so the ship will tilt, and then, well, they would the other way, and then you could slide that LCT right off, and it would slide off into the water, and that's how we launched them after we got to England. But we had to carry them from the United States, from this country to Europe. And when we got to Europe, it took us almost about 4 weeks, I think. we came down in between Ireland and Scotland. Then we went along the coast of England. We first hit, I think it was Falmouth, Weymouth Harbour, and Southampton, and we did a lot of maneuvers while we was in England. That's from the month of February, March, April, May. We would practice landings, and we could see the English planes. They were fast. They were traveling. They were fast. They would go 400 or 500 miles an hour, I think. That ship is when it was launched there. That's where it was launched in Evansville, Indiana. We had picked it up in Chicago. Well, we had gone to Chicago, picked it up in Evansville, came down to New Orleans, went along the Gulf, around Florida, and I noticed Florida, the sand was real white. It looked like snow product almost, you know. And that's when we went up to Boston and on up, and then we got to England, and then we maneuvered all kinds of practices in the English Channel and the bays. Then the first part of June, they had no more congregation. We couldn't get off the ship, so that we knew we was headed for England. So we were supposed to go there on the 5th, which was the day before D-Day. But they had postponed it another day because the weather was real rough. So we took our time going from England to France. And we got there on D-Day around noontime. And we just watched everybody trying to get into the beach. And then we got orders to go in, and so at 5 o'clock we started going in. But it looked pretty rough because everything in front of us was getting blasted by those 88s in the cliffs. And I saw one LCI get hit, and I saw one guy flying into the water, and we got to within less than a half a mile, about a quarter of a mile from the beach, when the destroyer escort got in between us and the shore batteries. The 88s were in there, and he was pounding at those 88s. And he actually drew the fire away from us. Then we got orders to stop and head back out, because it was just suicide to try and get in, especially with our cargo here. We wouldn't have been able to bring it intact. So we anchored. They told us to anchor right there within a mile, or less than a mile, from the beach. And the rest of the convoy, 4,000 or 5,000 ships, were out there, about 5 miles out. First thing I knew, we had a bunch of rhinos, that's platforms with those motors on them. We had 3 of them tied up alongside of us, and they were bringing the wounded, and first thing we knew, we had a bunch of doctors coming in, and they were operating on the deck of the ship, and we even had a German prisoner. And I could speak French. I tried speaking French to him, but he didn't understand that either. And English he couldn't understand, so he was German. So anyway, I left them alone and went up to the radio shack. And everybody in our cruise quarters, well, my bunk was a bloody mess. I couldn't use it until after we had gotten back to England, and I cleaned it up and put a new mattress and new linen on it. I forgot where it was now, but we stayed there for the night. And then, of course, in that part of the world, It's so far north that the days are real long and the nights are short. So the sun doesn't go down till after 11 o'clock at night or almost midnight. And the sun comes up early in the morning, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, the sun comes up. So when the sun went down, the plane came over and tried to straffle us, but we had these barrage balloons with wires so they didn't get too close. Somebody thought that he had hit one of our wires and had fallen next to our ship over there, but I didn't see that. Then some more German planes came over, but they were going for the 5 miles out. They were going for the fleet. So 4,000 or 5,000 ships with cannons and tracers. You talk about the fireworks. That was the biggest and greatest firework display I've seen in my life. I mean, there was, and every hour they would come and they would try and straffle and drop bombs and drop mines in the, on the fleet. And so for three, four raids we had that night, until next morning the battleship opened up with their big cannons, and I could hear those shells go right over our boat, ship. They'd get mad at me if I called it a boat. You could hear those shells whine, just whistles by. So they would do that for 20 minutes to a half hour, and then take a break, and then they would do it again. From 8 o'clock until noon they did that. Then at noontime they gave us orders to try and go into the beach. So here we go again. We let loose of all our rhinos and everything that was on board our ship, and get rid of quite a few of our patients or soldiers who were wounded, and they cleaned it all up, put them on boats, and brought them to the fleet. And then we tried to go in. So we got pretty close to the beach, when instead of going in, our skipper made a right-hand turn and headed west towards Utah Beach. And we kept going, and every mile or so you would make a left-hand turn to try and go in again, and then he didn't like it, I guess, so he would turn back and go down another. So we was going on that beach there from the right to the left, going towards Utah Beach, more or less. And we saw a hill there in between Utah Beach and Omaha Beach, and I think that's where he decided to go in. But before he got there, he had let one of our sailors swim ashore after we got by the river to see how the land looks, see where we safe, almost it's safer to try and land. So he got to that hill, and that's where we tried to go in. So when we started in, we knew we were going in because he dropped the stern anchor so that he could pull us out after we tried to go back out. And we got up to the beach where all the obstacles were, and the guy in the forecastle, he told the skipper that there was obstacles right dead ahead. So he tried to brake and pull on the stern anchor to stop the ship from going into those obstacles, and we stopped short of them within 5-10 feet probably. So we stayed there for an hour or so until the water went down. Then they opened up the bow doors, But before doing that, the CBs were in there, and they were with rifles popping off those mines that were on these obstacles. Now, those were like jack-o'-lanterns with mines on the ends of them, and then they had obstructions with poles, and they had mines on it. It was really 3 rows of different types of mines. So they pulled off. They put chains on a tractor, and they pulled off some of those obstacles after they got the mines blown up. So they made a path wide enough so they could put a iron steel mesh so that they could roll the tanks and the cannons off the beach without sinking into the sand and off the beach onto the hards. Because the sand over there is really soft and everything would sink right in. So we heard the rumor that 2 or 3 hours after that we had unloaded this load of 101 infantry, that they had stopped some tanks and had salvaged or saved them from coming and retaking the beach. Come about 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, it was time to try and get off the beach. Well, while we was on the beach, I even went out on the beach trying to find some shells, a souvenir of France. So I found 2, 3, 4 of them, then I started thinking if there's any, I could get shot at over there. I'd better get back on board ship. So I got back on board ship with my shells, and around 8 o'clock we started pulling on the stern anchor, and the propellers going in the backwards, trying to pull off the beach, but it wouldn't move. So we had to wait until almost 9 o'clock, a quarter of 9, before the ship started floating enough so that it was able to pull off the beach. So we pulled off the beach, we turned around and headed back out towards the fleet, and we got congratulated by the admiralship and everybody there for being the first LST to land our cargo intact. Because before that, only the small boats were able to get in. And so instead of waiting for the next day or everybody else to get rid of their cargo, we decided to go back to England. That is, the skipper decided to go back to England. So we had to go back on radar and radio watch on our own to keep contact with what was going on. And we headed to England and got another load and headed back for France. And this time we went to Omaha Beach, but it was altogether different than what we had seen the first time before, because they had sunk a lot of ships and barges to cut the undercurrent so the ships could be able to go in and out without being, I don't know, I wasn't the skipper, but that was what it looked like on the second trip in. So we unloaded our second trip in, went back out to England again, and loaded up again another load and started back for France on our third trip, and we was trying to catch up to a convoy that was back on their second load. So we was on our third trip in, and we were trying to catch up with the second trip in. So we caught up with that second convoy about the middle of the channel, and so we secured our radar and radio, and I was able to go down and get some sleep. So I got into my bunk and we slept, and then I noticed that around 20 minutes of 8 that the boys were having their breakfast, and I says, I need my sleep more than I need that food. So I just turned over and went back to sleep. Well, I just started nosing off when I felt my bunk go up. I knew we were hit, so I squeezed my life belt and got it inflated, so that at least they would find my body if it would float if I didn't come out of there alive. Then everything went dark and I could feel the water, and then I saw a little bit of light, and I thank God for still being alive. And then I started trying to see how I was going to get out of that hole, because the ship had, the deck, the floor had folded up, and I was in between the bulkhead, that's like a wall, and that's what saved me from the concussion. So I pulled on one of the cables, a wire, big heavy cable, and that broke. I said I could have got electrocuted, so I grabbed another cable, tested it for shocks, no. And so I grabbed myself and pulled myself out of that hole, and then I came down onto what was left of that deck there, and then I could see a big hole. And I was figuring, how the heck you're gonna dive into that hole without hitting that propeller, the screws. When I saw a guy come in from the other side, from the other end, and he got to the edge of the thing, and he was much lower than I was. I was much higher. And I said, well, I guess I'll let him go first. So he dove in, and I was going to dive in to see if I could help him also, when another guy came from behind me, and he says, don't jump in, Gene. He says, there must be another way out of here. So we started going around and trying to get to where the doors were. But the doors were jammed, and you couldn't open them. But some guys from the top side came down, and they helped us push, and we pulled, and they got the door open. So he went up that stairway, and I saw this guy, or this locker on top of this guy, and I said, oh, Jesus. So I says, I'm going to see if I can, push that locker off of him. This is where you're supposed to get superhuman strength, So I grabbed the locker, and oh my gosh, I only barely budged it. But then the boatswain's mate came in from the other side, and between the two of us, we pushed that locker off. He grabbed his shoulders, I grabbed his feet and legs, and we pulled him out of there. But then he threw him over his shoulder, and he started going up the sideways. And I says, I'm in my stocking feet, and I said, I'm going up the top side and see what the situation is before I get caught down here. So I went up top side, and I was greeted by my shipmates. The one that had gone up there, he was crying, telling the boys to go down and get me, that I was still down there. So I made it to the radio shack, and in these emergencies, I was trained to, take all the confidential stuff and put it in a bag and give it to your skipper, captain. And so I grabbed all the secret material and then brought it to him, and he put it in his. But the ship didn't sink, and we got towed the rest of the way into France, where we unloaded. And then some ship fitters came over and welded some big plates where the ship was cracked so that it would stay together. And they towed us back to England. And then everybody got off except for the skeleton crew. The skeleton crew is one radio man, one signalman, one, so 3/4 of our crew was left offshore. And I decided that I wasn't going to stay with the ship, and one of my radio men decided he wanted to stay with the ship. So he stayed with the ship, and the ship was taken and towed back to Brooklyn, New York, where it was cut. And they took the back end of another L.S.T, and they welded them together and made another L.S.T out of it. I got off in England and was